Provence is the most beautiful region of France. When most travellers say Provence, they mean the coast, and the French find this quietly hilarious, because that's not Provence, that's the Côte d'Azur, different thing entirely. What we're looking at today is the interior, the hinterland, the proper bit, the Provence that Provence actually means. The region sits in southeastern France, between the Alps to the east, the Rhône to the west, and the Mediterranean to the south. But why is Provence so popular at all? Climate helps, history helps, food helps enormously. The region has Roman ruins, medieval villages, 300 days of sunshine, and endless lavender fields. Is it crowded in summer? Absolutely. Expensive? Increasingly. Is it worth the journey, the rental car, and the linguistic humiliation of ordering coffee? We're about to find out. Getting there is easy. High-speed trains connect Paris to Avignon and Aix-en-Provence in around 3 hours. Marseille Airport is a major gateway, even if your destination is nowhere near the sea. Regional trains and buses reach inland towns, though a car increases range and reduces timetable dependency. The roads are good, roundabouts are numerous and sometimes philosophical. What kind of tourists come inland? Several species. There are the cyclists, recognizable by their huge calves, cultural tourists with notebooks, families escaping beaches, and food-focused travellers who have read enough to know where to eat. Provence has always been a destination for artists. Van Gogh created over 900 paintings here in just over a year. The man was either profoundly inspired or profoundly unwell. History suggests both, but the point stands. Something about this landscape makes people productive in slightly concerning ways. And the people who live here? French, certainly, but shaped by climate, agriculture, and distance from Parisian urgency. Outsiders are tolerated once they demonstrate basic competence with greetings and timing. Inland Provence is not hostile, it is selective. Avignon lies 100 kilometres northwest of Marseille and 230 kilometres south of Lyon, which makes it neither cool northern nor properly southern, and therefore ideal for compromise, administration, and historical meddling. Between 1309 and 1377, 7 successive popes lived in Avignon rather than Rome. How did this happen? The short version involves political chaos in Rome, a French pope named Clement V, and a very persuasive French king named Philip IV. Philip had recently had the previous pope, Boniface VIII, kidnapped and beaten. When Clement V was elected in 1305, he found reasons not to travel to Rome immediately. Then he found reasons not to travel there at all. He settled in Avignon in 1309, ostensibly temporarily. Temporary lasted 68 years. 7 popes came and went. They built a palace here. Was this a legitimate papacy? The Catholic Church says yes. The Avignon popes were properly elected and properly Catholic. But the situation created problems. Rome felt abandoned. Italian factions grew restive. In 1377, Gregory finally went back to Rome. Then he died the following year and things got considerably worse. What followed was the Western Schism. From 1378 to 1417, there were 2 popes, one in Rome, one in Avignon, each claiming legitimacy while condemning the other as an anti-pope. This was embarrassing for everyone involved. The situation eventually resolved at the Council of Constance, and the papacy remained thereafter in Rome. But Avignon kept its palace. The Palais des Papes is the largest Gothic building in the world. It covers 15,000 square meters. The walls are 50 meters high. The whole structure has 25 rooms open to visitors, and considerably more that aren't, probably containing either maintenance equipment or imprisoned cardinals. The building is imposing. There is no other word for it. The palace presents itself as a fortress first and a residence second. The walls are thick and the towers are substantial. What remains inside? Less than you might hope. The French Revolution was unkind to the Palais des Papes. Revolutionaries stripped the interior, removed furnishings, and converted the building into barracks. The palace receives over 600,000 visitors annually. Entry costs €12. The Bridge of Avignon, or the Pont Saint-Benezet, to use its proper name, is almost certainly why most people have heard of Avignon. According to legend, a shepherd boy named Benezet received divine visions commanding him to build a bridge. Local authorities were skeptical, as local authorities tend to be when shepherd boys claim divine instruction. To prove his mandate, Benezet supposedly lifted an enormous stone that 30 men couldn't move and carried it to the river. The bridge was subsequently built, completed around 1180 1185. Then the Rhône started washing it away. Flooding damaged the bridge repeatedly from the 14th century onwards. Each time repairs were attempted. Each time the river returned. The river, it must be said, was playing the long game. By the 17th century, the citizens of Avignon had apparently tired of this particular struggle. They abandoned the bridge. Today, 4 arches remain, extending from the Avignon side before stopping abruptly above the water. The bridge goes nowhere. It connects nothing. Can you walk on it? You can. Entry costs around €5. You walk 500 metres to the end and then turn back. Today, Avignon has around 90,000 inhabitants. The wider metropolitan area pushes the number higher, but the historic centre remains tightly bounded by its walls. Is Avignon interesting for foreign travellers? The answer is yes, but the town rewards curiosity more than checklist tourism. You can see the main sights in a day. Many people do. They photograph the bridge, look at the palace, buy a magnet and leave. That is a pity, but also predictable. The Verdon Gorge is, without putting too fine a point on it, a very large crack in the ground. It occupies a position at the transition zone between the lavender-scented, sun-baked lowlands and the more austere alpine foothills to the north. The gorge stretches 25 kilometres in length. Depth reaches around 700 metres at maximum, roughly twice the height of the Eiffel Tower, if Parisian references help. The French call it Europe's largest canyon, completely ignoring the fact that the Tara River Canyon in Montenegro is 4 times as long and twice as deep. The Verdon River begins in the Alps near the Col d'Arles and travels about 175 kilometres before merging with the Durons. For most of history, the gorge was not admired. It was avoided. The canyon was dramatic but unhelpful and inaccessible, which kept it off the itinerary for centuries. Interest arrived late, in the early 20th century, when Edouard Alfred Martel decided that the sensible thing to do was to go down into it. His 1905 expedition mapped and documented the gorge. He transformed a geographical inconvenience into a scientific object and, eventually, a destination. Curiosity opened the door and tourism followed with muddy boots. Rock climbing is serious business here. Limestone walls rise clean and vertical. They host thousands of bolted routes established mostly in the late 20th century. The climbing is technical, exposed, and allergic to improvisation. Confidence is useful. Overconfidence is educational. The gorge is dangerous. Cliff edges are often unfenced. The river, even in its calmer sections, presents drowning hazards. Every year produces fatalities, swimming accidents, climbing falls, hiking mishaps. The river, meanwhile, offers its own curriculum. Kayaking, canoeing, and rafting range from calm to corrective, depending on location and dam releases. The water stays cold, even in summer, which keeps enthusiasm sharp. Downstream, things mellow out, especially near the lakes. Yes, lakes. Artificial ones, courtesy of hydroelectric dams. Lac de Sainte-Croix sits at the western end of the gorge and functions as both reservoir and recreational stage. Its pale blue water hosts swimmers, paddlers, and boats. Further upstream, Lac de Castillon offers a quieter, less crowded version of the same arrangement. Both play a practical role in water and energy management, which rarely makes it into casual conversation. Getting to the Verdon Gorge requires intention. There is no train station built thoughtfully on the rim. The nearest major rail hubs are Aix-en-Provence, Marseille, and Nice. From there, a car becomes less of a luxury and more of a requirement. Before we continue, please push the like button to help this video reach a wider audience. Just a few kilometres north of Lac de Sainte-Croix, you'll find one of the most interesting places in France. Moustiers-Sainte-Marie is just a small village, but its location is stunning. Cliffs rise up behind the village and a little stream runs through the middle. From a distance, the place looks almost glued to the rocks. The village is known for the golden star that hangs between 2 cliffs above it. Legend says a knight hung it there in thanks after returning safely from the Crusades. The medieval period brought the usual French historical assortment: feudal lords, ecclesiastical disputes, a few plagues here and there, and regional conflicts between local nobility and whoever happened to be claiming the French throne that particular century. The 16th and 17th centuries brought the development that would define Moustiers for the next 400 years: faience production. Faience is tin-glazed earthenware pottery, and if that sounds rather unexciting, we should point out that the Moustiers variety became famous throughout Europe. Then came the French Revolution, which had the inconvenient effect of eliminating most of the aristocratic customers who could afford decorative ceramics. The industry collapsed. By the early 19th century, the workshops had closed, and Moustiers settled into obscurity as a minor agricultural village. The 20th century brought revival. In 1927, Marcel Provence established a new faience workshop, researching historical techniques and designs. The industry gradually recovered, and today approximately 15 ateliers operate in and around the village. Today, the travellers come mostly for the scenery. The cliff and ravine arrangement produces a visual effect that is, one must admit, really gorgeous. The French government has classified Moustiers as one of the most beautiful villages of France. As of current listings, 176 villages hold this classification, which rather dilutes the exclusivity, but never mind. From the main square, streets climb upward through residential areas toward the ravine. The architecture is largely 17th and 18th century, stone buildings with painted shutters in the characteristic regional palette of faded blues, greens and ochres. The waterfall and stream provide a pleasant focal point, with bridges crossing at various points and small channels directing water through the village in a manner that probably has some historical purpose related to fire prevention or sanitation, but now merely adds scenic value. Notre-Dame de Beauvoir is a chapel built high in the ravine. It demands a visit, despite, or perhaps because of the 262 steps required to reach it. The path begins behind the parish church and climbs through the gorge. The chapel itself, while small, dates in its current form from the 12th century. Gordes is perhaps the most famous hilltop village in southern France, located in the Luberon Massif. It sits on a limestone outcrop above the Rhône Valley, roughly 40 kilometers east of Avignon. The setting is elevated, exposed and visually dominant. Gordes essentially looks like what everyone imagines Provence should look like. The honey gold and grey stone buildings cascade down the hillside in a tumbling arrangement. The surrounding landscape has lavender fields, olive groves and vineyards. The light, particularly in summer, has that famous golden quality. The elevation of 370 meters above sea level provides cooler temperatures than the valley floor. The street network follows the slope of the hill. Steep lanes, steps and narrow passages dominate. This limits accessibility and concentrates foot traffic. Vehicles are restricted. Pedestrian traffic concentrates along a small number of routes. The medieval period was very important for Gordes, architecturally speaking. The chateau that currently dominates the village skyline dates primarily from the 16th century, though its foundations incorporate elements from an 11th century fortress. Built and rebuilt by the Simeon family, the building represents a transition from medieval military architecture to Renaissance residential design. The Abbey Notre-Dame de Scenic lies approximately 4 kilometers north of Gordes, down a winding road. This 12th century Cistercian abbey remains an active monastery. Cistercian monks still reside and produce lavender products and honey. The abbey was founded in 1148, during a period when monastic expansion across Europe was proceeding at a rapid pace. During the French Revolution, it was closed, sold as national property, and repurposed for agricultural use. Restoration began in the 19th century. Monastic life resumed sporadically. The architecture is stripped back and serious, with thick walls and rounded arches. This Romanesque architecture represents one of the finest examples of Cistercian design extant. Certain areas are open at specific times, while others are not accessible. Silence is expected here. The lavender fields in front of the abbey are one of the most photographed views in France. Including Scenic is essential to any serious discussion of Gordes as a destination. Architecturally, historically and geographically, it forms part of the same system. Leaving it out would just distort the picture. Another major attraction associated with Gordes is the Village de Bory, located just outside the main settlement. This open-air site has dry stone huts built without mortar, historically used for agricultural storage and shelter. The buildings illustrate rural construction techniques common across inland Provence. They also provide perspective on how rural living once looked like. Over 2 million visitors travel to Gordes annually, though precise numbers prove difficult to establish for an open village without ticketing ticketed entry points. Some estimates push higher during exceptional years. The Abbey alone reports around 200,000 visitors per year. July and August account for the overwhelming majority of visits. Day trippers form a large proportion of visitors. Longer stays are less common. Photography-driven visits dominate daytime hours. Early mornings and evenings are quieter and allow easier movement. From a traveller's perspective, Gordes works best as a concentrated stop rather than a prolonged base. The village offers a tightly defined set of experiences. It does not expand its infrastructure to absorb demand. Visitors adapt instead. The drive from Avignon to Gordes takes approximately 45 minutes via the D900. The drive from Aix-en-Provence requires about an hour via the D973. Both routes offer some very nice scenery. Provence is famous for its lavender fields. The Romans used lavender for bathing, scenting and medicinal purposes. The name itself comes from lavare, which means to wash. During the Middle Ages, lavender became essential in perfumery, medicine and hygiene. By the 19th century, lavender harvesting had become an industry. Wild lavender was gathered in the hills by hand, distilled locally and sold to perfumers in Grasse. Now, where exactly does one find these famous fields? The Valensole plateau is the obvious answer. Valensole covers roughly 800 square kilometres and produces a substantial portion of France's lavender crop. But why lavender and why here? Why so much of it that the ground looks permanently colour corrected? The answer is Provence itself, specifically the inland plateaus and foothills where the soil is thin, stony, alkaline and not interested in growing wheat. Lavender, being unbothered by hardship and deeply unimpressed by rich farmland, thrives in precisely these conditions. It prefers poor soil, strong sun, dry air and altitude that discourages most other crops. In other words, land that farmers once regarded as agricultural leftovers. Waste not, want not, or rather plant lavender. There is also the small matter of timing. Lavender blooms for a short window in early summer. Peak lavender season is late June to late July, depending on altitude. Economically, lavender tourism is a clever little ecosystem. Farmers get extra income from visitors. That includes tastings, guided walks and farm shops. The villages get restaurant trade and accommodation bookings, and the regional branding gets a boost. Provence becomes not just a place, but a fragrance, a colour palette and a price multiplier. You're not just buying a bar of soap, you're buying the essence of Provence, which is a lovely phrase for comfortably marked up plant oil. Aix-en-Provence occupies a rather fortunate position in southeastern France, 30 kilometres north of Marseille. It sits on a gentle plateau, framed by low hills and watched over by Montagne Sainte-Victoire, which appears in the background. The climate is dry, bright and sometimes windy. The Mistral turns up unannounced and rearranges plans. Aix matters historically because it was the old capital of Provence, back when Provence still had some political weight. The Counts of Provence ruled from here. René of Anjou, the good King René, held court here in the 15th century and, by most accounts, threw excellent parties. The city accumulated wealth, status and an architectural dignity that it has carefully maintained ever since. Today, around 150,000 people live here. The university, established in 1409 and one of the oldest in France, contributes 40,000 students to this figure. One cannot discuss Aix-en-Provence without addressing the fountains. The city has over 100 of them. This raises an immediate question: why so many? The thermal springs, combined with the fresh water from the surrounding hills, made fountain construction both practical and fashionable. The centre is compact. Everything important fits within a 20-minute radius. The Cours Mirabeau is the city's main artery. Constructed between 1649 and 1651, following the demolition of the medieval city walls, the boulevard extends 450 metres from the Fontaine de la Rotonde to the Fontaine du Roi René at its eastern terminus. The design reflects 17th century French urban ideals, symmetry and the strategic placement of trees. The historic centre is dense and walkable, but the old town presents some real navigational difficulties. The street plan predates modern logic by several centuries, and streets change names without warning. Religious buildings appear regularly, cathedrals, churches and former convents repurposed into cultural spaces. The Cathédrale Saint-Sauveur is the standout, layered with Roman, medieval and later additions stacked together. You can arrive here by TGV train from Paris in about 3 hours, but there must be a catch. Of course there is. The TGV station sits 15 kilometers outside town, in a field surrounded by nothing. The French really committed to this joke. Shuttle buses run every 15 minutes at least. The Pont du Gard is, at first glance, just a bridge, a large one, and then you look again and realise it is not really a bridge at all, it's an aqueduct. The Pont du Gard sits not far from Nîmes. It was built by the Romans in the 1st century as part of a 50-kilometre aqueduct system, designed to carry water from a spring near Uzès to the city of Nîmes. They needed about 200,000 cubic metres of water daily. The obvious problem, there's a river valley in the way, the Gourdon River to be specific, so they built an enormous bridge. The blocks were cut at a quarry about 700 metres away and dragged to the site. They were lifted into position using wooden scaffolding and cranes powered by human-operated tread wheels. The aqueduct has 3 levels. The bottom tier has 6 arches and the middle has 11. The top has 35 smaller arches, carrying the actual water channel. The gradient of the whole aqueduct, the entire 50-kilometre stretch, drops only 12 metres. That's a slope of roughly 0.4 metres per kilometre. You couldn't even notice that walking, and yet the water flowed. Why did it survive? Partly because the local lords in the Middle Ages decided to use it as a toll bridge instead of dismantling it for building materials. Now, is the Pont du Gard the most impressive Roman aqueduct? Some would argue for the aqueduct of Segovia. Others might mention the systems supplying Rome itself, but most of those are partly ruined or buried underground. The Pont du Gard just isn't. It's remarkably intact. It survived floods, wars, and neglect. Getting there is easy enough. About 25 kilometres from Nîmes and 30 from Avignon. You can drive there. Can you walk across it? Sort of. There's a lower level you can walk across. Not the original Roman one, that's protected. 18th century engineers widened the bottom tier to create a road bridge. They did some damage in the process. Not catastrophic, but noticeable if you're looking. So you cross on that level. It's fine, and the views are nice. The site also has a museum, which is actually quite good and informative. It explains the engineering and shows the tools they used. The city of Arles sits where the Rhône River forks into its 2 arms, the Grand Rhône and the Petit Rhône, before they drag themselves toward the Camargue Delta and eventually the Mediterranean. You can walk along the riverbank. The whole thing looks rather nice when the light hits it correctly, which, to be fair, is most of the time. The historic centre, though, that's where the action is. That's where the tourists go. The centre holds maybe 15,000 people, possibly fewer. Hard to say. Many buildings are second homes, others are short-term rentals. The Romans built big things here. The amphitheatre, for instance, les arènes, as the French insist on calling it. This amphitheatre could seat 20,000 people when Romans gathered to watch gladiators. Now it seats travellers and hosts bullfights and concerts. The building itself is impressive, with 2 tiers of arches. You can walk through it and climb to the upper levels. Arles represents an unusually intact example of Roman colonial planning merged with medieval densification. The city's street layout still reflects the Roman and Decumanus, meaning it's both fascinating and mildly confusing. Its heritage listings under UNESCO status since 1981 have ensured strict conservation, which explains why everything looks ancient and costs double. Can we avoid discussing Van Gogh? We cannot. The man spent 15 months in Arles in 1888 and 1889. He painted over 200 works, cut off his ear or part of it, depending on which version of events you believe. The whole episode is documented and thoroughly mythologized and absolutely central to Arles' modern identity, whether the town likes it or not. The city has multiple walking routes where visitors can see the real places behind Van Gogh's works. To be honest, most of them look nothing like the paintings. Arles sits on the main railway line between Marseille and Montpellier. Direct trains from Paris take about 4 hours on the TGV. Regional trains connect to Avignon, Nîmes, Aix-en-Provence, basically anywhere in the region you'd want to go. The train station sits just outside the old town, a 10-minute walk to the centre. So, you've heard of Mont Ventoux. Congratulations. That puts you ahead of the average tourist who thinks Provence is just a fancy perfume you can't afford. This mountain represents Provence at its most vertical and least forgiving. It rises to 1,909 metres and stands apart from surrounding ranges, which explains its visibility from an unreasonable distance. From a geographic perspective, it dominates inland Provence by height alone, no symbolism required. Mont Ventoux has appeared in texts since antiquity. Roman roads passed nearby, medieval scholars referenced it, Petrarch famously climbed it in 1336 and wrote about the experience, which is often cited as an early example of recreational mountain climbing. Whether this was genuine leisure or simply an unusually well-documented walk, we don't know. Either way, writing about climbing a mountain did not become optional after that. The mountain later gained strategic importance for observation and communication. A weather station was installed near the summit in the 19th century. Cycling is where Mont Ventoux becomes unavoidable. It's not just a climb, it's the climb. The Tour de France has included the mountain many times. Routes from Bédoin, Malocène and Sceaux offer different gradients and lengths, all of them demanding. The Bédoin ascent is the most discussed, long, steep and exposed. Wind speeds are high and snow appears unpredictably, but none of this has discouraged visitors. You can also hike if you enjoy walking uphill for hours. You can visit the observatory and stare at the cross at the summit, erected after some poor guy got lost up there. You can arrive here by car. Just point your vehicle towards the giant greyish blob on the horizon. Public transport is not a good idea. Yes, you can take the train to Carpentras, then a bus, but the bus runs when it feels like it. A taxi from there would be pricey, so just stick with your car. Gourdon is one of the smallest travel destinations in southern France. The village stands at around 760 metres above sea level on a rocky plateau overlooking the Rhône Valley, just 15 kilometres north of Caen. The history of Gourdon was all about siege warfare and strategic anxiety. Its story is one of elevated paranoia. The site was used as a lookout by the Ligurians and later by the Romans. But its heyday came in the 9th century, when it became a fortified stronghold to guard against Saracen raids. The village is really small, a cluster of stone houses, a medieval castle, and a handful of shops that sell soap, lavender, and things in jars that cost suspiciously more than they should. Tourism is what keeps Gourdon alive now. Most visitors come up from Nice, Cannes, or Grasse for a day trip. They arrive, wander around for a few hours, and leave slightly sunburned and very pleased with themselves. But even with the crowds, Gourdon never really feels chaotic. There aren't many streets to get lost in, and there's always a view waiting at the end of one. The castle is open to visitors. Inside, there's a small museum with furniture and tapestries. The trails around the village lead through pine forests, across limestone ridges, and down to the Gorges du Verdon. Getting there is relatively simple. Simple in the sense that you'll need a car, nerves of steel, and a firm belief in your GPS. The drive from Nice is scenic, winding, and truly terrifying. But the reward is worth it, a panoramic view unlike anywhere else in France. Nobody travels to Provence expecting Colorado, but here we are, in what the French have boldly named the Colorado Provencal. This weird place sits about 50 kilometres east of Avignon. It's an old ochre quarry, that's it. Former industrial site, now tourist attraction. Very on brand for the 21st century. The ochre, which is essentially fancy dirt, if we're being reductive, and we are, comes in approximately 47 shades of orange, or red, or yellow. The French mined this stuff for centuries to make pigments. The mining stopped decades ago. Erosion has been carving spires and valleys ever since. Rain is washing new shapes into the cliffs. Getting there involves the usual Provençal experience of driving down roads clearly designed for horses, small and thin horses. The village of Roustrel sits nearby. The site itself offers two circuits, the Sahara Trail and the Desert Blonde Trail. 30 minutes or 50 minutes. You should do both or you'll be leaving after half an hour. The Sahara Trail is the shorter one. It goes through columns of ochre that look like dripped candle wax. The Desert Blonde Trail adds drama. White patches appear among the orange, where the iron oxide content drops and the sand goes pale. The paths are marked, which is both helpful and slightly disappointing. Some travellers would want to get properly lost among the ochre pinnacles to have a genuine adventure. Instead, there are signs every 50 metres. Very sensible and very unadventurous. Very French, actually. The bureaucracy of leisure. You should go early or go late. The midday sun turns the place into a furnace. Also, wear shoes you don't love. The ochre gets into everything. Shoes, socks, trouser hems, even your ears. This is aggressive dust. But is it worth visiting? If you're the sort of person who finds geology vaguely interesting, then yes. Bonnieux is another nice hilltop village you should visit. You'll find it 50 kilometers east of Avignon. It stands on the northern slope of the Luberon Massif, looking across the valley toward Lacoste, which is another scenic competitor. At an altitude of 430 meters, Bonnieux overlooks a landscape that is textbook Provence, with vineyards, cypress trees and stone houses. The Romans established estates and farms in the area, though the village as it exists today took shape in the Middle Ages. For several centuries, Bonnieux belonged to the papal territories. During the Renaissance, wealth from agriculture and trade made the village unusually prosperous. The old church of Saint-Gervais and Saint-Protais, built in the 12th century, still stands at the summit, accessible by 86 stone steps. The new church was built in the 19th century at the base of the village. The architecture is very consistent. Houses are constructed from local limestone and arranged in terraces. Roofs are tiled in terracotta, shutters are painted in colours officially approved by heritage committees, and walls are thick enough to resist heat. The streets are narrow and apparently designed to discourage any form of efficient movement. The layout follows the contour of the hill in a spiral pattern, ensuring that wherever you walk, you are both lost and exhausted. Common activities include walking up to the old church, walking down again, drinking something cold, and saying lovely at intervals. The nearby Pont Julien, a Roman bridge dating to around 3 BC, remains in service for pedestrians and amateur historians. Did we miss any of your favourite Provence villages? Let us know in the comments. If you loved this video, hit the like button and subscribe to World Travel Guide for more amazing videos.